Welcome to the Planning Committee for August. Some of us work during August. Well done, colleagues, for turning up. We have, if I introduce the top table for those of you who won't necessarily know who we are. I'm Brian Morby, Chair of the Planning Committee. On my right is Ros Gwyn, who is taking the notes as clerk to the committee. On her right is Polly Ellis, who's a solicitor with the Council. On my left, Duncan Smith, who's the Chief Planning and Public Protection Officer. On his left is Richard Lewis, who's Head of Development Control. Sitting over there using the screen for the system, which records all these proceedings, is Geraint Thomas. At the dais is Norman Jones, who making one of the presentations in relation to one of the planning applications, and also Andrew Ferguson sitting down here, who's also making a presentation. And then members of the committee are those 7 fine ladies and gentlemen sitting there. And you no doubt are interested observers and speakers, and we'll explain the procedure for speakers in due course when we come to the planning applications as such. That, I think, concludes the preliminaries. Apologies for absence. We've had a number. Those are recorded on the attendance list, which is circulating members. If you could add any other apologies that you're aware of, I'd be grateful. And then declarations of interest. Polly, could you explain, please?
Just to remind members that they need to complete the declaration of interest forms in the attendance register folder if they're declaring a personal interest in any application. I've had the following personal interests declared. I've had, in relation to the first application, that's the application for Lantarnham Road, Councillor Kemp has declared a personal interest. The second application for the land in St Cadoc's, I've had a declaration of a personal interest by Councillor Parish. And also I've had a declaration of both a personal and prejudicial interest by Councillor Crick in relation to the second application.
Thanks, Polly. Members, Councillor Crick and Councillor Parish in particular, are you happy to confirm your interests?
I confirm my interest in that application.
I also confirm, thank you.
And I confirm my interest in item number 1.
The first application? Yeah, fine. Thank you. Councillor Crick, I think you will need to leave the meeting for that particular item.
Yes, I understand, and it's at the end of the meeting, isn't it? Okay.
Very convenient for you. Some people get... Perhaps you ought to come back in just to check the date of the next meeting. Councillor Taylor, sorry, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I got a personal interest on Pontypool Community Council.
In relation to the first item?
Yes.
Sorry, the second item.
Number 14.
Number 14.
14, sorry. Number 14 stroke
All right.
Stroke 00123.
So that's the second of the applications, the same as Councillor Parish's. Yeah. Okay, thank you. And there's also an officer personal interest in relation to the second application from Richard Lewis, who will also leave the meeting at that point. Right. Thank you. Then we come to minutes of the Planning Committee held on the 17th of June, which are there for your confirmation or otherwise, members. So can we go through for accuracy on page 4 of your agenda? Page 5 and page 6. Are you happy to confirm those minutes as a true record of the meeting? That's moved by Councillor Davis, seconded by Councillor Kemp. Everybody happy? Yeah. Good, thank you. Are there any matters that you wish to raise from those minutes? Members or officers? No matters arising? Grand, thank you. That reminds me, as I was reading out the page numbers, please make sure that in your copy of the agenda, the page 18 precedes page 17, which I know is a bit silly, but it's the number 17 needs to follow number 18 on the pagination, because anyway, so on that item, page 16 is followed by page 18 as on the paper, which is, hopefully that's what you've got, because page 17 then is the beginning of a new item, which is the schedule of applications. Yeah. Okay. Because you do need to read page 18 in context. Okay, good. We'll remind you as we get to it anyway. Then, if we've dealt with item number 3, let's deal with item number 4, which is wrongly headed on your agenda. It's not planning appeals, it's lawful development certificate, and it's a report thereon. And who's leading it on this one, folks? Oh, Andrew is. All right, you're doing it from there. Fair enough. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. This is a lawful development certificate application, and it's been reported to Planning Committee as it's the first such determination that the local planning authority have made. And there are also enforcement cases and pre-application inquiries that it could be, this decision and the reasoning behind it could be applicable to. So the application is for the siting of a mobile home, which is incidental to the main dwelling at Fairways on School Lane in Waynfelling. Excellent. So this is the main house here. As you can see, it sits in a row of dwellings fronting onto the road. And what is being proposed is a mobile home in the rear garden. Now, I'd like to stress at this point, I'll go through it in a bit more detail, but the reasoning behind this could result in buildings being located, for example, in front of properties. So, whilst it's located in the rear, in this instance, it's not always going to be the case necessarily. This is an application for a lawful development certificate, and the local planning authority are required to issue a certificate if we are satisfied that the operation or use proposed does not require planning permission. So the determination on a lawful development certificate is on the basis of law, i.e. facts, and it's not on planning policy like a normal planning application would be considered. As a result, there's no statutory requirement to consult with neighbours, because we're making a professional recommendation on this. Given the importance of this decision, we have sought council advice, who've advised us in terms of the procedure to be followed, and as I said, this assessment has been made in line with that. So the question is planning permission required for the siting of this mobile home? Thanks, Owen. So the first question to be asked is whether the proposal constitutes a caravan. For planning purposes, a caravan and a mobile home has the same meaning as that in the 1960 and the 1968 Caravan Acts. So basically, the key points are that it's designed for human habitation, that when assembled, it's physically capable of being moved by road from one place to another. That doesn't necessarily have to be on its own, that could be on a truck or something, but as long as it can be moved in one piece, that's one of the criteria. And it meets certain dimensions as specified in the Act. So that's exactly what it says in the Act there. If we go on to the next one, please. The courts have decided that if something falls within the statutory definition of a caravan, as provided by those acts, it can't therefore also be a building. It's one or the other because they're mutually exclusive. And based on the information provided with the application, we consider that the mobile home falls within the definition and is therefore a caravan as within the specified dimension of the Caravan Act. That's the first part of this. Moving on from that, the second question is, does the proposal involve development? This is the Section 55 of the Town and Country Planning Act, which says that this states what development is, for which planning permission would or would not be required. There's two arms to this. The first arm is that operational development. So if someone's building something, they might need planning permission. The second arm would be a material change of use. So looking at this, For example, with this proposal, they would be creating a hard stand-in, but that would be permitted development. And all else that's proposed, connection to services, which court cases have said is easily reversible and therefore isn't operational development, and brick skirts around the base of this mobile home, which wouldn't be attached to the mobile home, and therefore, again, easily reversible, doesn't make this operational development. So then we have to consider whether it's a material change of use. And this is the key point. Basically, it's been submitted on the basis that it wouldn't be permanently affixed to the ground. The mobile home would be occupied by people who are the grandparents of the people living in the main house. They would retain their close family links with their daughter and son in the main house. It wouldn't have its own private curtilage. It would share the garden area, it would share access and parking. And essentially, there'd be no change to the planning unit. So again, we sought council advice on this, and this is what we've been advised. The existing use is residential in nature. The garden area is obviously part and part of that residential use, as anyone would have. And provided, it's obviously normally to be expected as part and parcel of any dwelling's normal facilities. The garden area is just an integral part of this residential use, and provided that the planning unit is for a single family within this one unit, which is this property at Fairways, then this does not involve any material change of use. So on that basis, what is being proposed, officers are of the opinion that it doesn't require planning permission because it's not development as defined in the Act. So therefore, on that basis, officers are recommending that the lawful development certificate for this proposal will be issued following this meeting. The report is being brought forward for members to note because of some of the implications it may have. Thank you, Chair.
Members, any questions? Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Chair. Going through this now, I mean, that's all we can see, because sometimes I don't think we get a good insight to what's going on. We look at that plan now, we just look at it and thinking, whatever. I would rather have seen some photographs of the size of the unit and where it was going on the back of the house, because we really sometimes look at this and we pass things, and I've passed something sometimes, and when I've seen the development, I think I would have had a different outlook on that if I'd have seen a different set of plans. We just see things like this. I would like to have seen something more featureable on it, that we could see the house and the unit itself and how it's going to be fixed on. Would this set a precedent? I mean, I'm just thinking, if somebody wanted to develop their own property, then they're thinking, well, look at this. No, we don't need any plan application. We can just put a mobile home on the back. Would this set a precedent? I mean, I'm thinking of a couple of cases I know of that if people seen this, they think, that's new. That's one way out of it. And is it going to set the precedent for getting out of a plan application?
With regards to the photos, as I said, we didn't bring those to you today because this application is being reported to note rather than for members to make a decision on it. So I do apologise that we didn't bring them forward. We could have shown you more, but it's just to highlight that this is an issue and it could set a precedent in terms of how we determine future applications for lawful development certificates. In this case, a lot of it will depend, always, with regards to how this proposal is being used. So it's sometimes easier, once it's being used in practice, to look at something and say whether it's being used in connection with the main planning unit. In this case, as I said, what's being proposed, they've said it's going to be occupied by one family, which is a key consideration. They're going to rely on the services from the main house. They're essentially not going to have separate bills. There's not going to be a separate curtilage. And we are issuing this certificate on that basis. If they start doing something else, then it might take it outside the realms of this certificate. They might need planning permission. There will be instances where people try and put mobile homes in their gardens and live in it as a separate unit to the main house. That would require planning permission because it's a new planning unit used independently.
To follow on that, so it's in the garden at the moment. How long is it?
Sorry, It's proposed.
Proposed, sorry. I'll propose unit and then bring it up. That's fine. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you. My main question is based on whether or not it's going to be a permanent fixture. In regarding the services which will be going to this caravan, if you like, or my mobile home, etc., if like, I'm going to take it that there's going to be ablutions and toilet facilities, which in turn is going to need sewerage, if you like, which in turn is going to have certain regulations going from the house to the mobile home. You're looking at electricity, you're looking at water as well. To me, you're going down the road of a permanent fixture, even though what's on top could be determined as temporary, if you like. You've still got all the mains, let's call it the main supplies in whatever form, go into this fixture. Once, or if for whatever reason the caravan mobile home is taken away, if you like, you're left with, if you like, all the services go into that hard stand, which is permanent. And so I am a bit concerned, and I'm not sure why this has just come to the planning committee just to note, when it's the first one, and obviously it's going to evoke an awful lot of discussion when at the end of the day we don't have to decide anything.
It's the officers' view, and they take this view about whether or not delegated powers are given to them in respect of planning issues. It's the officers' view that, because supported by council, that this matter has already been determined legally, that this sort of development does not require planning permission. What it requires is a lawful certificate, and the officers are advising ourselves that, in this case, the lawful certificate should be given on the basis of certain conditions relating to the certification, which deal with some of the points you've made. So clearly it's got to be something which remains in terms of the certification which the officers intend to give, having taken the view of council. Effectively, that means that if the circumstances of the family change, or if other people occupied it, or if other things change which took it outside the terms of the certificate, that at such point it would require planning permission and an application would need to be made. Otherwise, there would be enforcement issues which the council could deal with. So it's really more for information. In a sense, in answer to Councillor Burnett's original question, about whether a precedent has been set. The law effectively has set the precedent, or an interpretation by those who have determined this elsewhere, that this sort of thing becomes under the sort of general terms of permitted development, provided certain conditions are met and continue to be met. And our job really as members is just to understand that and to note that is the position. But officers didn't really need to bring it to committee, but in the interest of making sure we are well informed, that was the purpose of the planning officer in bringing it to this committee now. We can't really do anything about it, other than, if you wanted to, campaign for the law to be changed. But as things stand, it's simply something to note, and obviously from a member point of view, if you get inquiries about that sort of thing from other people, other constituents, then you're a little bit better informed now to be able to deal with those, whether that be from people seeking similar certification or from neighbours and the like, asking perhaps a reasonable question: what's this caravan doing in the back garden next to my back garden? But we're talking about a legal situation which we can't do anything about. Ron.
Thank you for that, Chair. Yeah, thank you for bringing it to us. I mean, as I say, this is the first one, and it's very interesting. As I said, as it set a precedent, I'm sure this being the first, isn't going to be the last, is it? As you know, in my area, there's lots of problems with mobile homes and caravans, whatever. Not in the same bracket as that, I know, but I mean, there's always problems with mobile homes and caravans. But as I said, I mean, looking at that, it does need planning permission, and it is a way around small development on the backhoe. So, as I say, it's the first one we've come across, and I doubt it's going to be the last when people see that this can be done, you know. And thanks for bringing it.
Yes, just a quick one again. Is this going to affect the community charge of the building that's obviously in place at the moment?
I wouldn't know that, in all honesty, Councillor. That wouldn't be a planning issue. We've looked at this basically, does it need planning permission? We've made an assessment that it doesn't based on case law and followed it through and sought council advice on that. So that wouldn't be a planning issue that would be relative to this issue. If, for example, they started getting billed separately, someone looked in the future, came to us with different information, then we could look at whether at that point they had breached or they needed planning permission at that. We are granting the certificate on the basis of how they're saying it's going to be used.
But the fact that on the one hand you're saying that some bills are going to be split, if you like, the community charge, because we're looking at an addition, if you like, then the community charge, if it is going to be increased, I don't know, as you said, if like that could be increased, that could be split.
I think the answer really is that it's not our decision to make. It's community charge bands are reviewed every now and then, every few years, not by this agency as such. It's somebody else. I forget who it is, but they determine that sort of thing. It's not really a matter which the council can deal with. But I think that may be something which we'd all be interested in to see whether it does affect community charge. But until the bandings are changed or reviewed, then we can't really answer that. Councillor Waite.
Chair, I'd just like to recommend the officer's report, that we receive the officer's report to move progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waite. But Councillor Crick had already indicated a wish to speak, so I'm going to allow that.
If I could just briefly, the valuation office often have to deal with instances like this, where, for example, garages have been converted with the same sort of facilities, and perhaps someone has moved into one, been advised for various reasons to then go onto the local electoral list, and then a community charge situation has begun to appear. But again, under valuation law, it does depend whether it's going to be rented out to someone or sold on to someone outside, and then it's a completely different ball game. Otherwise, it's exactly the same as this situation here.
Thank you. And Councillor Crick speaks with some authority on the matter, I think. Anyone else want to say anything, or are you happy to accept what Councillor Waite has suggested, that we note the report? Yep. Okay, thank you very much. Right, on then to item 5, which is on page 17, don't forget, which follows page 18. Not often I will say that. And the first application is in respect of the erection of 16 number one-bedroom flats, 2 and 3 storey, together with associated car parking and bin store at Somerton House, former Somerton House Hotel on Llantarnam Road. We do have, we'll have a presentation from Andrew again on this particular one, and we do have speakers. So Mr. Scarfy, Councillor Daniels will be called in at the appropriate time, and Mr. Carl Lewis, the agent for the applicant, will also be speaking. Now, Mr. Scarfy is an objector, just so that all of you are aware that all of you speaking in respect of this application and the next application have 5 minutes, fairly strictly, well, very strictly timed, in which to say your piece, and it will be down here in the main part of the chamber. So, Andrew, would you care to present this particular application, please?
Thank you, Chair. This is an application at the former Somerton House. The site was subject to a member's site visit at the end of July. The building that was on site was in this area up here. This has subsequently been demolished after a prior notification application for these works. The building was previously used as a hotel and subsequently a house in multiple occupation with 15 flats in it. This is a full application for 16 flats split over a two-storey element in this section here. So this is the two-storey element. As you can see here in the dotted lines, this is the outline of the previous building, the previous Somerton House. So just to give you a bit of an idea of the scale of the building as was compared to as proposed. So this is the front elevation at the top and the rear elevation on the bottom. It is for 4 flats would be for people with learning difficulties. 4 would be for autistic residents. 4 flats would be for disabled users, and 4 flats would be for over 55s with an element of care need. If we can, sorry, Norman, can we just go back previously, just to the site layout? The original access, as I said, this is the bottom, southern end of the building. The previous access was in here. What's been proposed as part of this application is a new access located further away from the junction of Newport Road along here and Llantarnam Road, which would go to a rear parking area which would provide parking for 16 vehicles. As I said, the access has been moved 17.5 metres further away from the existing access, so further away from the junction. There'd be a rear amenity space down here for all residents and an enclosed amenity space for people, the autistic residents, because of their special care needs. If we can go to the elevation, sorry, thank you. Following concerns from officers originally had concerns with regards to the amount of parking. That's been increased, and the scale of the building has been reduced. So this was originally 3-storey, and this was originally 4-storey. So we've got that reduced the number of units. What's being proposed is of ground floor level, brick, and on one of the gables with render above and then timber detailing. Thanks, Norman. So yeah, these are just the side elevations. So as you can see, this is Llantarnam Road here, going down. The site slopes down steeply to Newport Road at the rear, and this is where the garden area would be located. This is the parking area there. This is the location, that was the elevation that would face onto basically what is the conservation area diagonally opposite the corner of this site. So yeah, this is basically viewing onto that elevation with Newport Road down here and Llantarnam Road there. This is the view along Llantarnam Road. This is the existing access, and its proposed access is moving it closer to the adjacent property. This is a view from the rear. This wall will be retained where possible. It will be reduced in height, given structural stability problems, with ball-top railings on top. This is a view of the site from the dual carriageway. So this is where the building was originally, the former Somerton House. It's obviously going to extend further across the site. And then this is a view of the properties opposite the proposed flats. And as I said, as part of the design, we've picked up some of the details. The agent has picked up some of the details in terms of the timber detailing, the gables, the windows, etc. So the key issues with this application are access to the site and general highway safety, considering impact of other developments, parking provision within the site, potential noise issue for residents given the proximity of the main roads, the impact on neighbours in terms of overlooking the scale of the building, and that the Section 106 contribution is now unviable. The officer recommendation is for approval, subject to conditions and a Section 106 agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much. I think we ought to check, really, whether Councillor Daniels is, in fact, going to come, and because he's... Oh, right. Well, could someone just check to see whether he's there? Because he could come in now, couldn't he, really?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. If you don't mind, please, Ros. Yep. But we'll take the speakers. next, I think, members, before you debate the matter. So, Mr. Scarfy, can you come and down to the...
This is my first time. I'm not a professional in this. Before my 5 minutes starts, is it possible just to point to 2 errors in the presentation?
No, that's within your 5 minutes, I'm afraid. Sorry about that. Great, thanks. Okay, when you're ready. Well, yeah, you're not going to convince me otherwise. So I'm going to say go in a minute, and then the 5 minutes will start. So, yeah. Okay.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chair,
Thanks.
members. Unless you reject this proposed development, you will be guilty of endorsing highways in a blatant practice of double standards, one for Joe Public and one for those with a little bit more of influential partners. I am objecting to the proposed development on 2 counts. Firstly, a precedent has been set with a statement from the Chief Highways Officer for Torvain, Mr Paul Wheeldon, in 2008 in response to a proposed residential development of mine. He stated that an access off Llantarnam Road was too close to the corner and therefore unacceptable. Secondly, there have been several personal adverse traffic incidents that I am aware of. I was first on the scene to a fatality involving a car directly opposite the proposed development. My wife was involved in a car accident opposite the proposed development with none other than your own councillor Bob Wellington. A tenant of mine was involved in a major collision at the entrance to the old hotel caused by poor visibility. In none of the above incidents was speed the main factor. It cannot be a factor on a blind 90-degree bend. The problem was, and still is, restricted visibility. The decision in 2008 was a shock to me, but was correct. I ask you to uphold Mr Wheeldon's original judgment in 2008. Nothing has changed. The corner has not moved. If you do not uphold the original judgment, you must hold yourselves accountable for the possible disastrous results of his change of mind. That's Paul Wheeldon's change of mind. I will then seek financial compensation from Torvain County Borough with the help, if necessary, of the Welsh Assembly, the local government ombudsman and the European Court. 2 further points. Although I live less than 10 metres from the proposed development, why was I not one of the residents notified of the proposal? 11 residents were, and only 1 was nearer, and the other 10 were twice the distance away. Finally, I note that now you're going to charge for your pre-application advice, as per the Argus last week. Now I will quote from some documents that validate my comments on this case. I've got a letter in 2008 from the Planning and Public Protection Service. In the letter, it goes on, and at one stage it opens with a new paragraph. And the new paragraph starts, notwithstanding the above. I understand what notwithstanding means. Does everybody else? Notwithstanding the above, the access off Llantarnam Road is within close proximity to the traffic signal control junction of Llantarnam Road, Newport Road, and is therefore unacceptable. The only access point supported by the Highways Officer would be between 373 and 375 Llantarnam Road. Right, I was so shocked by this that I needed Paul Wheeldon to visit me and confirm that the only access acceptable would be between 375 and 373. No mention was made of moving the entrance a mere less than 15 metres, my measuring, you say 17 and a half, from its present site to where it now appears Mr Weldon is happy for it to be. So once again, I would like to state that after consultation with Paul Weldon, I accepted his advice. Unfortunately for us, that advice from a business point of view was disastrous, and the banks foreclosed on us, repossessed, but that's life. In 2014, I was shocked to hear the news of the proposed development and thought ugly thoughts of double standards, preferential treatment involving grants from Edwina Hart, planning applications, affordable housing, Melin homes, and all this prompted me to write my first letter of objection, which I will now read to you, if I've got time. So I wrote this: would you take this letter as a formal objection to the proposed development on the site of the former Somerton House on Llantarnam Road? The present owners, who are far more au fait with planning matters than I, sought to demolish the hotel and a rather fine chestnut tree prior, I stress this, prior to obtaining the necessary planning permission to do so. Any planning permission was retrospectively applied for and retrospectively granted. I know that because I've got confidential information. I'm not going to divulge it at the moment, but that is a fact. It was retrospectively applied for and retrospectively granted. The tree was down.
That's your 5 minutes.
The foregoing ruling was a shock to me in 2008, so much so that I needed a site visit from the head of highways for 12
That's your 5 minutes.
Wow, pathetic, isn't it? Okay. Thank you very much.
Last call then for Councillor Daniel.
He's stuck in Blenavon. That's how much help I get from everybody. Thank you.
So, Mr. Carl Lewis, could you come down, please?
Thank you very much. Development is submitted or was submitted on behalf of Melin Homes via previously Green Hill Construction. They have since gone to administration, but the development is still going ahead, along with myself as the agent and as Melin Homes as the RSL. The development is also had lots of support from Torvine and the social services of who will house the development. As Andrew said, it's to support disabled, autistic, learning difficulties and over 55s. The over 55s being on the back of the extra care scheme that myself designed on the old former Brookfield site, which has gone down well. Now, the car parking numbers have been identified. There's one number space each for each dwelling, 16 in total, plus the turn area for the ambulance. The tenants, as you can see on the site, the tenants themselves, it'll be deemed that a lot of them won't have cars. They won't be viable to drive cars, and they won't actually have a licence. But in pursuit of getting approval from highways, we sought to provide one space each. The majority of them will be mainly for the carers of the residents. Needless to say, perhaps the disabled will have a car, and they have a space each in full compliance with CSS guidelines of highways. The design itself has evolved from various stages of meetings with the planners, highways, and Stephen Peel, Conservation Officer. As Andrew said, the first concept was a 3- and 4-storey dwelling. My idea being a bespoke building on the entrance to Cwmbran along Llantarnam Road. But that was reduced. The numbers reduced from 22 down to 16. It still made the site viable, but just about. And we reduced the entire height by 1 metre as well. The development is a metre down from the public highway, so the ridge line is only 1 metre below the houses opposite. So there is no impact or great impact from the local amenities and from the street scene. The external facade has been designed to mimic the existing vernacular of Victorian age. It's a big block, but we've broken it up into various elements, deep windows on some elevations, short windows on others, brick gables and mock Tudor panels. The Victorians are very good at disguising long facades by breaking them up into separate elements. We've done the same. That's consistent throughout. The existing boundary walls will be retained where possible. New walls to the front with ball top railings, offering privacy. The only hard boundary treatment will be around the autistic unit, because they will need that level of privacy because of their very nature, and they have a separate access as well. But everything else is open, and it's got communal gardens. It gives the feeling of a free, open development. The development is in full compliance with all planning policies. We have spent a long time and a lot of discussions with Andrew, and I feel we've got a development here that will be sympathetic to the local residents, local communities and the street scenes. All I can say on behalf of Mr Scarfy's comments of the highways and the entrance, I'm aware of the previous applications that went in on this site, because I myself was involved in one of the applications. It involved the other development next door, but that was circa 60, maybe more, up to 100 units. So access from that development would have been slightly more adverse than 16 units. Now, the original entrance has set a precedent. Going into the hotel, again, could only be 4 or 5 units, but we have pushed the access as far north as possible from the traffic signals. Mr. Paul Wheeldon has been very adamant on this, and it has taken a long time to get that specific entrance agreed. So it's not on a whim. It's not a 5-minute decision. It has taken months of discussions with Mr. Wheeldon, and he is happy with our entrance now, providing the required site dimensions, entrance dimensions, and visibility. If it is recommended for approval, if it is granted approval, it will provide much needed care to this community. It's the first of its kind where a building is housing such tenants as the disabled, and I do say that if this is approved and when constructed, it will be a flagship for more in Torvine, because I think they need, at the moment, such residents are in bed sits or their own home with not much care. This will provide
That's the end of your 5 minutes.
Okay, the extra care that is needed of them. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Lewis. Okay. Members, if you allow Mr. Lewis to 30 seconds to get back to his seat, and then we'll start the debate. So, Ron, Veronica, to start off with. Okay, Ron.
Thank you, Chair. Well, firstly, I'd like to... Come on.
Advise that further information in response from the officers concerning some of the complaints. So.
Thank you, Chair. Starting off with Mr Scarfy's comments, obviously he's objected to the application. If I clarify a few issues, that might stop some of the questions coming in or give you further questions. To start off with, Mr Scarfy obviously referred to highways having double standards, saying that this applicant has had preferential treatment as the access is too close to the corner. I can guarantee that that's not the case. The first pre-application inquiry that was submitted for this site goes back to 2008. Obviously, the situation has changed since then, but what was proposed at that time was a development of 8 dwellings and 1 flat. Now, those were between 2 and 3 bed dwellings, and the access proposed was in exactly the same location as it was for Somerton House. So that is materially different to the access proposed, firstly, to this development, and also the development is different in terms of the nature of it to what was previously proposed. When we give out pre-application advice, as I said, it's on the bottom of the letter that was sent to Mr Scarfy. It clearly states that our pre-application advice is given without prejudice. When we consider a pre-application inquiry, we will always try and seek the best possible development we can within the site constraints. once a formal planning application is submitted, we then have to make a formal determination of it. Mr Scarfy didn't progress with anything and didn't submit a formal planning application, so as I said, that was informal advice looking for the best situation. The Highways Officer has obviously considered the proposal based on the information provided by the applicant and considered this access, and is of the opinion that it is further away, obviously, so it's an improvement on what was previously there and is acceptable on that basis. With regards to, in terms of Mr Scarfy saying that he wasn't consulted, we obviously have a statutory duty to consult any adjoining landowners, as we have done in this case, and or, for a major development such as this, put up site notices and a press notice. 2 site notices went up, one outside the adjoining property, number 377, I believe, or 375, the one directly adjacent to the site, and one was also put on Newport Road on the corner with Llantarnam Road. We also put a press notice in the paper with regards to that. Finally, with regards to them undertaking work prior to obtaining consent, there's no tree preservation order on the site, and the site's not within a conservation area, so there's no statutory protection for the trees. So the chopping of those trees didn't need consent. The former owners of the site did start demolishing the building without the necessary consent. This was alerted to us very early on by neighbours, and we contacted them straight away to stop the development, and it was ceased. As I said, they'd taken off some of the roof coverings, but the rest remained until the necessary prior notification consent was in place. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much. So, back to you, Ron.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to speak to Mr Scarfy. I'm so sorry you didn't get any support from your local ward member today. How unprofessional that is, considering he did call the site meeting, and he wasn't here to support Mr Scarfy on his objection. But that's up to Mr Scarfy and the local member to sort out. You did touch on the parking, Andrew, and that's one of the questions, but you did say, now there's 16 flats there, 16 parking spaces. I think I do understand with the situation there won't be a lot of the residents driving anyway, but I just want to know, are you happy with 16 parking spaces for 16 flats?
Thank you, Councillor. In terms of the CSS standards for a development such as this, there's probably a marginal shortfall of between 1 or 2 spaces in real terms. However, the Highways Officer is acceptable based on the information provided that there are a lot of these flats are going to be for disabled users, that parking provision is acceptable on that basis. We've attached a condition to any grant of consent, if members go with the officer's recommendation, that at least 12 of those flats be kept for people with disabilities, as defined by the Equalities Act 2010, to specify, obviously, to ensure that that situation stays the same, so that parking doesn't become an issue if these were general purpose flats.
Just one more question on that. In these flats, will there be carers living in or not, or is it just on a daily, not a 24-hour basis?
There won't be carers living in. For example, the people with autism, so for the flats, will have a higher care need. So it's likely that they will have carers come in every day for the people with autism. The other people are likely to have less care needs, but no carers will be living in. They're all one-bed flats for the residents to support independent living.
That wouldn't necessarily prevent a waking night watch, as it's called, from carers. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Crick.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation, Andrew. I wonder if you could just clarify a couple of things for me, please. With regard to the brick wall that exists, is it going to be reduced in height along Llantarnam Road as well, and as it sweeps round into Newport Road? Because that's obviously where the visibility problem has been in the past. And in connection with that as well, are there double yellow lines or yellow lines leading up to the traffic lights on that side of the road? I seem to recall there being some, but no, it's not at the moment, is it? Perhaps you could just advise on that, please.
In terms of the brick wall, it's not the location of it isn't being changed. It's only being reduced because of the structural stability of it. So the location of it there will stay exactly the same, but where it'll be reduced to approximately 1 metre in height, 1.1 metre in height, with then ball top railings on top. So the situation isn't going to be any worse. It might be better because obviously you might have some permeability through the corner, but as I said, it's negligible if it's going to be much of an increase. In terms of double yellow lines, I believe they are right at the junction, but not that far along Llantarnam Road, but I can't guarantee that.
Is it possible to look into that, to see if that would help, given residents' concerns about the problems on that corner?
I think we can put it to highways, but what I do know is as part of the, obviously members might be or might not be aware, there's been several other developments in this area in recent years. As part of that, we've had 2 sets of Section 106 funding to improve highways within the vicinity. As part of that, the speed on this road was reduced from 40 to 30 miles an hour. The road was realigned, etc., etc. There are, I believe, as I said, there's another scheme pending as part of that, but I think that the overall highway improvements in this vicinity have been considered. We'll certainly put it to the highways officers, but as I said, they have considered a comprehensive scheme given other developments, and as I said, they've just finished completing that in the last year.
Robert?
Thank you. Sorry about this. When Mr. Scarfi came down, he said that there was 2 errors in the schematics. If like he was given the opportunity to outlay them, if like outline what they were. However, he chose not to do that. But my problem is now that because there's potentially 2 faults with the schematics, if you like, that is playing on my mind. If like, could I ask you to give permission not for Mr. Scarfi to enter into a discussion, but to come down to actually point out where he thinks the 2 errors are on the schematics, because that is something I think is important for us, knowing that we are dependent on the schematics.
I think it made it very clear that Mr. Scarfi could deal with those particular issues during his 5 minutes. I know he ran out of time, but he chose not to. If he thought they were that significant, I think he should have pointed them out at the beginning of his 5 minutes rather than peter off as he did. That's something that I can't answer for, and we do stick strictly to the 5 minutes. And to allow someone else to come down or twice would actually make it very difficult to refuse anybody else in the future.
But it's not to enter into a discussion.
Well,
it's not to enter into a discussion. I totally support you on that. It's a case of the fact that if these schematics are wrong, then basically we as a planning committee ought to know
Councillor
that.
Kemp, when you did have, if you wished to, perhaps that could have been pointed out, but you could have gone and had a word with him to find out what it was he was going to point out, and then you'd have been well informed to ask the question. But I can't have Mr. Scarfi coming back down again, and I can't give you time now to go and have a word with him, but that's something you could do for future reference. For what it's worth, I assume one of the inaccuracies he would probably have referred to, allegedly, is the reference that Andrew's already referred to in relation to where the access would be, because he was referring to between 37 and 373 and 375. But in fact, that was something that Andrew dealt with when he was dealing with the pre-application advice comment, remember? So maybe that was one of the issues. But no, but that was Mr. Scarfi's responsibility, not ours. No? So you're ready to come to a conclusion? Yes, Councillor Taylor.
Chair, I'd like to recommend the Council's approval.
Second that, Chair.
It's moved and seconded that the application be approved. Presumably you're agreeable with the reference that Councillor Crick made in respect of a review of the parking restrictions in the area, just to get Highways confirmation that they're happy with those as part of the recommendation or as part of the decision. Okay, and so you're being asked to approve the officer's recommendation with that addendum. Could you please show whether you are in favour, please?
Chair, could I ask that the approval with all the conditions laid out?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I think that's... Yeah. Okay, all those in favour of that, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Mr Scarvey, Mr Lewis, if you wish to leave, entirely up to you. I hope, Mr Scarfy, you aren't leaving feeling too badly about us. We still what? I don't know, actually. I don't monitor that. Right, members will notice that Councillor Crick and Richard Lewis are leaving because of their interest in the following item, and we should have reminded members that there was a personal interest declared by Councillor Parish and Taylor in respect of the previous item. No, in respect of this item. What am I talking about now? No, in respect of this item, yes. Okay, so item 2, and Norman, I think, is going to present this one on construction of 5 two-bedroom houses and etc. at Mount Road, St Cadix. Thanks, Norman.
Thank you, Chair. This application involves the development of an area of open space, or part of an area of open space at Mount Road, St Cadix. Members visited the site on the 30th of July, and notes of the meeting are included. This proposal was the subject of pre-application discussions, or development of the site was, and during the course of that, those discussions, the scheme was reduced from originally 9 houses down to 6, and what the scheme now proposes is 5 two-bedroom houses and 1 3-bedroom house on the end in semi-detached forms, each having private driveways with a forecourt area and private gardens to the rear. The end property will have a driveway with a frontage facing towards the play area, which is to the north of the site to be developed, and it also has a frontage facing Mount Road. There's a play area, as I stated, to the north. There's another key consideration is Church Farm to the rear, which is a listed building, and the scheme has been developed with the retention of a significant part of the open space to have a standoff and buffer with this listed building. And this is the street scene from Mount Road. House types, the two-bedroom, and that's the design of the three-bedroom property. This is the site currently at the moment. This is Church Farm. You've got the equipped play area to the north. That's the play area. Looking down along Mount Road with 2 other developments, you've got a converted property there, formerly a barn, now a residential property, and the development would front onto Mount Road. Got a row of garages opposite with traditional local authority type opposite. And that's looking up the site again along Mount Road, showing of that is proposed to be developed. It's looking opposite the site. Thank you, Chair.
Number of speakers. First of all, Mr. Vic Warren, if you could come down, please. As an objector. And Mr. Damien Brown, likewise, I'll call you in a moment. And then Mr. Panu as the representative on behalf of the applicant. So, strict, pretty strict anyway. 5 minutes only, please, Mr. Warren. When you're ready.
Good afternoon, Chair and Councillors. Thank you for hearing me. I'm Vic Warren. I'm speaking for St Cadoc's Neighbourhood Watch, which has become the focus of concern from residents on this issue. The Neighbourhood Watch objects to the proposed development and has forwarded some 25 individual objections as well. I believe others have been submitted. I live nearby, not in St Cadoc's, but I am a member of the Neighbourhood Watch, and I've been asked to help. I believe I can say I also represent many residents who didn't manage to submit objections. Several people have said to me that they knew nothing about the consultation that did take place or the planning application. And we believe there are two solid grounds in our view for considering that the proposal is inappropriate and should be rejected. These are community value and planning criteria. Firstly, it is very wrong for the community. This area is a precious and valued recreation area, used by children and families and for community events for literally generations, probably since the estate was built. People of my age have told me that they played on the wreck 60 years ago. I believe you've seen the area, and I believe you would have seen then the TCBC sign on the lighting column, which declared it to be a children's play area, with the added command, no golf. Very obvious proof that it has been designated as a play area by the local authority for many, many years. Adjacent to the area is a new playground for younger children, which replaced old swings and slides which were unsafe. The new playground was a joint project by Bronavon and TCBC, very praiseworthy, and was the subject of several community meetings facilitated by Communities First, me mainly. It was not an easy process, but agreement was reached, and one very relevant aspect in that process was that the playground would be designed for young children, whilst the grassed area in question would be retained as an informal play area for older children and community events. Bronavon officers appear to have forgotten that, but they were parties to that public verbal agreement. This wreck is an important and long-standing facility for the estate, designated by the council, and to take it away would be socially detrimental for all the families there. The number of children on the estate has been increasing, and also for the community in general. Planning. The area is not identified for housing in the recently completed local development plan, so why should it be regarded as a development site? It is in fact essential as a recreation area in planning terms. The total area of recreation for informal play in the estate, 2 areas, one of which is not very useful, amount to some 1/4 hectare. In your supplementary planning guidance on recreation, the criteria for an estate of 200 houses at 12.6 square metres per house amounts to the same figure, 1/4 hectare. This area is thus essential to meet TCBC's own criteria. If you allow this development, you will be ignoring your own rules. Bronavon may say that there's an area left for recreation if the houses are built. The plan I've seen does indeed show a small area of land left at the rear, but of course the available play area for the estate would then be well below the requirement. But leaving that aside, we would strongly suggest the area is insufficient for any real play. It is tucked away out of general view, not attractive, no open access, in close proximity to gardens for balls to find their way into. Parents would not be able to easily monitor their children from the road or nearby seating, as they can at present. On the other hand, it could well become an attraction for antisocial behaviour in dark evenings. It looks a prime candidate to us, the Neighbourhood Watch. It is certainly too small for community events. These would be no longer be possible. No one is saying that more rented housing is not needed, but we all know that the local development plan has housing supply targets in excess of those required for Torvine residents alone. So these plentiful identified areas should be used. I could mention local sites as well. Trevethin School site has an allocation of affordable housing allocated to Melin, I believe. Why not Bronavon? There is an area in the links, and why some of the large acreage of public open space land off Woodside Road in Trevethin is not included surprises us. So please support the St Cadoc's estate. Show your residents that even if Bronavon is prepared to sacrifice a vital community facility, Torvine Council will not. Please reject this application. And one additional thing, the Neighbourhood Watch is prepared to put the area forward as a town green, to be registered as a town green, if you reject the application. Thank you.
And Mr. Brown, please. And ready?
Good afternoon, councillors, Planning Committee. I actually live at 11 Mount Road, which is directly opposite the structured play area. Now, I have various grounds of objection. The first one, that the development affects the setting of the listed building, because when you look at the development, it's really not in keeping with the area at all. And by the removal of the green area that is currently designated as a play area, not land, as Bronavon are putting it, and it is a play area. My wife herself played on that ground as a child, and is absolutely gutted that it is to be removed as a child resource. I was also part of the development committee, the steering group for the development of the play park, and again it was agreed that that play area would remain as a grassed play area for older children, and we spent an awful lot of time and effort discussing antisocial issues and even with removal of existing shelters in the old play area to facilitate that. Next point is overdevelopment of the area. There's already large-scale building projects underway nearby on Pennygarn Hill. And once developed, obviously there's going to be a significant rise in the local population, including children of all ages, which puts further pressure on these community resources, and it's going to have an inverse effect on a number of grounds. On the proposed development, I noticed that they say, well, that there is relevant parking spaces, and from a highways point of view, I dispute that quite desperately, because when you look at how they're supposedly parking, it means that you'd have to have cars directly in front of other cars on the drives, which basically means sort of a lot of those spaces are unusable. And having seen a very similar development with that arrangement on St Cadoc's Road, it's meant an awful lot more road traffic and cars parked on the actual road, not off-road. Now, bearing in mind that is a play park, okay, with lots of young children using that area, I have again witnessed several near accidents and things like that, and have sort of gone, and my wife has actually pulled children off the road away from incoming traffic, because it is actually on a bend and visibility is not great. It is known that the play park is used with children with both hearing and sight difficulties. I myself am a foster carer and looking after such children who already use that site. The proposed buffer area, or the green behind, which they say can still be used as a play area and things like that. When you did your site visit, you will be, of course, aware that it slopes off. There's a quite dramatic gradient towards the rear. The playing of any kind of ball game and the use for any kind of social activity is vastly restricted by that, and I can't see how it can be used in anything else than as it's just going to be an antisocial pinch point. And if you talk to any police architectural design person, they would say that is a nightmare waiting to happen. As it stands, living opposite the park area, we already monitor the park and do call the police when there is antisocial behaviour. We won't be able to do so with obviously the development there, because obviously there will be now vast areas of unseen ground.
That's the end
Thank
of
you for your
5
time.
minutes.
Okay, ready now? Yep. Lovely, thanks.
I'm just going to read a short statement and then I'll respond to some of the individual... Did you get the first bit? Yeah. So in terms of the statement, the new development will provide much needed homes in the area as well as retaining an open space for local residents. The green space has continued to serve a variety of uses over the years, including as a site compound for our £3 million improvement programme for the area for over 24 months. However, we recognise the importance open space plays in communities, which is why our plans include the retention of the majority of the space, over 56%, for community use. And we would welcome input from local residents on how this can best be utilised for future generations. Moreover, we followed a rigorous approach to this planning application, spanning many months, in order to develop a scheme that met all the planning requirements. This has been reflected today in the Office's detailed and thorough report and subsequent recommendation for approval. So addressing some of the points my colleagues put forward earlier, in terms of the poor level of consultations as well as the local authority fulfilling its statutory obligations, Bronavon feel that they went above and beyond the call of duty with this scheme in particular, undertaking more consultations than any of our other schemes. We held 2 public events, and I held 5 one-to-ones, as well as writing to over 200 individuals within the St Cadoc's area, and responded to each of those individually if they came forward. In terms of the use of the ground, as I pointed out before, we will look to retain over 56% of the green area, and that's excluding the play park that is already present. And for every anecdotal comment that comes forward in terms of the green space that is used, I could safely say that I could come forward with anecdotal evidence as well that said the space is not used. In terms of the issues around antisocial behaviour, the scheme has been thoroughly checked by the Gwent Architecture Liaison Officer, and he's happy with the design, and we've made some amendments to fit with his requirements. In terms of the parking, the scheme meets the CSS parking guidelines and also the Welsh Assembly's design quality requirements from a parking perspective. And the final point, in terms of the village and town green that Vic mentioned, I just want to point out it's a separate matter. And in our experience, we have experience of village green application. The scheme does not meet the minimum requirements to be registered as a town or village green. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Norman, would you care to respond in any way? Oh, yes, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Just responding to points made by the objectors. In relation to the consultation that was carried out, obviously that the application was the subject of statutory consultation due to the fact that it's in close proximity to a listed building, which meant it had to be put in the press and also on site, and neighbours were notified, 10 neighbours were notified of the development. Both Mr Warren and Mr Brown made reference to the community value of the open space being diminished by the proposal. However, the site isn't in the local plan as an area of important urban open space. When that study was carried out, a recreational study was carried out and then taken forward into the LDP, this site wasn't identified. However, policies do allow non-designated areas to be looked at to see whether they are suitable for retention, and we're satisfied in terms of comparison with the policy that the scheme is satisfactory in terms of the level of recreation in the area, the retained level of open space, which also acts as a buffer to the listed building. The question of it becoming an area for antisocial behaviour, the Gwent Police Design Unit at Gwent Police have looked at the scheme, and they are satisfied with the scheme, subject to some planting on the rear boundaries of the property, and there is a landscaping condition required to cover that. In terms of the listed building, the conservation officer was concerned in relation to the initial proposal and the impact on the listed building, Church Farm at the rear. The scheme has been developed to mitigate the impact on that property, and he is satisfied that has been satisfactorily designed. So in terms of the site, it isn't an allocated site for housing. However, this is a relatively small site within the area of St Cadoc's. It retains, as Mr Pano said, over 50% of the open area. The parking is satisfactory from the highways point of view. All the properties having their own off-street parking, and we recommend it to members for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Noel. Members, any comments, please? Barry, I think, was moving towards asking to speak. Okay, he's conceded. Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Chair. I do feel sorry for some of the objectors because of losing green space. I mean, we all want to keep our green spaces, and they put a good case forward as well. But I've been saying for years, as we all know, we are desperate for housing, and when we have to, as councillors, we have to deal with people that need a house, whatever the circumstances. We have all these big developers come in and build their big estates, which South Spass is going to be, and there will be some there. But we have people like Bronavon now, and Mellon Homes have come along. I do hope that they're not going to take too many of the green spaces, because Bronavon do own a lot of it now. But I have to go with the officer's recommendation here to approve this application, although I do feel sorry for the people of Peniganda. They're losing green space. But we do need housing, and we are desperate. Year after year it gets worse. So if Bronavon and Mellon are building them, it's easing the pressure off everybody. And as councillors, we see some sad cases out there where people haven't got the right living conditions. So I can't see how I could actually turn down this application when it is for social housing.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Chair, looking at this application, the play area, does the play area belong to Bronavon? It
Yes,
does. So have we assurances that this play area will never ever be built on? Because I've got to be honest, I got concerns with overdevelopment for that area, because if these are built and the play area is not protected for future, you know, you've just completed a circle up there. So have we got those assurances?
I don't think any applicant can give an absolute assurance about a piece of land which actually isn't part of the application. I'm assuming you mean the sort of formal play area, the circle area at the top of the map. That is the formal play area which has been built, and you know, we can't expect any assurances in respect of that. If you were also referring to the informal play area, which currently is the larger piece of land below, and on that map, obviously, you see where the proposed housing development is towards the left, then you know, the officer from Bronavon has indicated that they would want to work with the community in order to find a particular use for that. But again, we can't expect them to give an absolute assurance, and Mr. Parno, even if he were minded to give such an assurance, we wouldn't really be able to take that assurance as absolutely firm, on the basis that I don't suppose he's got the right to act on behalf of the Bronavon Community Housing Board. But the intention seems to be that the piece of land remaining would remain undeveloped, therefore as a potential play area, but you've also heard the objectors saying that that particular play area or that particular area isn't suitable for certain types of play, at least. And the worry is that children playing there would not be seen from the residents living on Mount Road, where Mr. Sorry, I've forgotten your name. Mr. Brown lives at number 11, I believe. So that's, you know, you can't expect assurances to be given. You've got intentions being given, but it's not a guarantee. Sorry.
Because, well, as I say, Chair, what I am concerned about is that if this development goes ahead and Bronavon then decide they want to develop further, you have just completed a circle up there and nothing else.
Chair, can I?
Yep, please.
Can I come in? That would be subject to another planning application that the committee would deal with. So that's a point where, if members had concerns, those sort of issues could be picked up. As the Chair has pointed out, the determination today is the red line area that we've got on the plan. You can't make speculation. And as I say, any plan to build on land other than this would have to be subject to a planning application that can come through here anyway.
Councillor Kemp?
If I can keep on to the overdevelopment, if I can draw members to the bottom of page 48 and local plans, where it stipulates, if you like, the distances between buffer zones and the play areas, and then turn into the top of 49, where officers, that they say, I can't tell whether these distances have been complied with. And so the key word for me in that sentence is complied with. The fact that there's distances and there's distance which has been stipulated, and yet we're not sure whether they are complicit or not. In addition to that, I appreciate that 56% of the recreational land, the green is going to be retained for recreational usage. However, if you like, if you've got, as seems to be the case, a big slope, if you like, in which basically people want to play football, and, well, the only real way that they can play it is uphill or downhill. I've been there, and it's not a bad, and that's a bad experience, I can assure you. I don't think, I must be honest, I don't think I'll be supporting this application.
Yeah, picking up on the point in terms of the distances from the play area, on the final paragraph in the report, it is recognised that it does fall short of the 20-metre guidance distance by 2 metres from the end property to the play area. However, given the overall design of the scheme, given the need for parking and making the frontages work in the street scene, we feel that 2 metre compromise is acceptable in the round. In terms of the area, we still think that is a usable space and contributes to the overall amenity of St Cadoc's as a whole.
Anyone else wish to? Can I just say, if anybody's minded to not approve the application, then you need to come up with an acceptable and material planning reason, essentially. And I'm quite happy for us to have a short adjournment if you need officers' advice on how to phrase such a reason.
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. I was at the site meeting, and we had a long discussion there. The highways officer was there to answer our questions, and we had a plan in front of us. All the parking is off-road. It was adequate. I feel for the people who have used this area as recreation area, but it's not a designated recreation area. Am I right in saying that? It's not a designated recreation area.
It's not identified as an important area of open space. No.
But there is a play area, obviously, to one side. It was a flat area. It looked to me to be adequate for the area. We do need these housings very, very badly. So I would propose that we accept the officer's recommendation with the conditions as stipulated in the report.
Okay, is that seconded? Seconded by Councillor Burdett. Are there any amendments to that particular proposal? Okay. Do you wish to debate the matter any further? You ready to vote then? Okay. All those in favour of Councillor Parish's motion, supported by Councillor Burnett, please show. All those against? That's carried. 5-2. Fine. Thank you very much. Next item then is the date of the next meeting. Was Veronica going to come back, do you know, or did she say goodbye? We'll just tell her, shall we? The date of the next meeting is 4 o'clock on the 16th of September in the Council Chamber. So hopefully see you then and some of your colleagues, because we're a bit light today. So thanks so much.